to another episode of the Wellness Wire. What? Guys, take a look who's sitting next to me today. Tyler Eggleston, aka The Man. Alright? So, I was talking to Wade earlier this week. We were like, let's get a podcast session booked for Friday. I was like, what time works for you? He's like, 10 a.m. should be good. And then, I'm not gonna lie to you, I could have sworn I sent out a calendar invite, and turns out I didn't. He had no idea that we were shooting an episode today, and so I hit him up at like 9:50, and I was like, all right, hey man, I'm here. And he's like, dude, what are you talking about? And you want to know why I wasn't even worried? I wasn't even worried one bit, because I said, I know a guy. If I call him right now, he will be here in 30 minutes, and the show will go on. You know who that guy is? Tyler Eggleston.
What's up, man?
Happy to have you here, dude. It's first time on the pod, dude. Definitely will not be the last. And we just wanted to put out an episode today because there's something going on right now that I think is causing a lot of turmoil. It's causing a lot of uncertainty, and in times like this, we find that when it comes to treatment, when it comes to sober living, we see an increased risk of relapse, and we see an increased risk of losing some of the progress that we're making in recovery when situations that are going on are causing people stress and uncertainty, and there's a lot of division in the world. And obviously what I'm talking about is the political climate, right, of the country. And hold on a second, we're not gonna sit here and talk about politics. That's not what we're going to do. But what we are going to do is just share our experience from working with the Sober Livings and the treatment center of what it can do to your sobriety, right? And so we're not here to advocate for one side or the other. Rather, we're just here to maybe share some insight into how to regulate your emotions if you are someone who's being affected by what's going on. Because it's pretty crazy out there.
It's insane. And you see it every 4 years, right? All of a sudden, people have these spiral moments like around this time of year. It starts happening, change is coming, whether it's good or bad, and no one really knows, right?
Yeah.
Like, no one's quite sure. However, just the simple fact that there is change.
Yeah. Yeah, man. And for anybody who's an addict or alcoholic, change isn't always easy.
Oh, dude.
And I think specifically for like addicts and alcoholics, dude, it could be even a little harder. I don't know. Sorry, guys. This is like, I'm looking at myself on this camera and it didn't really look like it was level, and I might have just made it even worse. But so such is life. But dude, you're right. It seems like every 4 years, it's like complete mayhem. Regardless of whatever happens, it's like all of a sudden, all hell breaks loose, and it's like everyone's like, oh no, this is gonna be horrible. And that is not good for people in recovery, people in active addiction, people dealing with mental health problems. And when you're already somebody who is susceptible to being overwhelmed, or you're already having problems with regulating your emotions and learning how to respond to situations and not react to them, it doesn't help when you get on social media or you turn on the TV or like wherever you are, we're getting bombarded with just a lot of negativity, I feel like.
I mean, okay, so I was bartender for 10 years. And I gotta say, some of my highest sales days that I've ever had was either on election day or on inauguration day. And so in recovery, right, it's real simple that, like, correlate the two real quick. one leads to the other and this and that. And so people, you're right. Like if we're dealing with new emotions and regulating your emotions and all this stuff like this, and you're starting to get overwhelmed and you're starting to see that as an addict and someone in recovery, like your first response normally is to get outside yourself. And how are you normally going to do that?
Right.
Go pick up the drink, go use real quick, do whatever you can to sit there and get outside of that emotion because it's uncomfortable to be in it.
Yeah. Yeah, it's that flight or fight.
Yeah.
And when you're, in active addiction, a lot of your life is spent in that high fight or flight. When am I going to get my next drink? When am I going to get my next drug? You got to keep up with the web of lies you're telling everybody. You're trying to maintain this job. You're juggling so much that you're constantly in survival mode, right? And when you're in recovery, a main part of the 12 steps is how can we find a way of living that brings some serenity, some peace, some normalcy to your life, right? And we try to stabilize so things don't always have to be that chaotic. So then if something as much as what's happening right now, where it just seems like there's just mass hysteria going on, when you're in early recovery, when you're in early sobriety, those are things that can instantly put you back into fight or flight. Oh shit, I'm not gonna be okay. And all of a sudden, I don't know, I don't feel as secure, as serene, dude. And then what is your body and your mind's initial reaction? It wants to go back to that thing that it's been using this entire time to get yourself out of that, right?
Yeah.
Because your mind, your body is saying, oh no, we're in trouble, we're in danger, get out of danger, get out of danger. How do we get out of danger? Go drink, go use.
Yeah. I mean, before you called me, I actually had a phone call 30 minutes prior, right? And call it what you want. Maybe it is the time of year, maybe it's what's going on. But people are struggling right now, right? Mm-hmm. I had someone call me up and she's sitting there oh, I'm uncomfortable, I'm not doing what I have been doing and all this stuff. And I'm well, it's real simple. You continue what was working for you. She's oh, well, it was working when I was going to meetings, doing all the stuff I was supposed to do, doing all these things. I'm all right, what happened? Real simple. I stopped doing all that.
Right.
And it's okay, well then let's get back into that real quick because you're inside your own head right now, you're freaking out, and that's happening with a lot of people right now. I'm seeing it in all the houses, talking to the guys, and it is that uncertainty of the world, I think.
Yeah, I think it has a lot to do with the climate in general, not actual climate, more just social climate of the country, I think. But a lot of the time too, it's interesting, January as a whole, I feel it's a time where, you're looking ahead to this new year, you're kind of reflecting back on the year that you just had, the holidays had just happened, so dude, you mix all of that in, right? Some people are struggling financially. Maybe they overexerted themselves through the holidays and now they're dealing with the stresses of that, or the stresses of just a new year, or now you add in oh, there's an inauguration and it's this huge thing that's rocking the country. Bro, you can't go anywhere. Instagram, TikTok, Facebook. It is nothing but people spewing their political opinions, and it's you're just kind of it's overwhelming.
It's too much.
And dude, I just think it doesn't do anybody good. No. I feel and I feel it's that's something that's really is stressing people out.
Yeah, and in that stress, right? It's so hard to keep up the spiritual side of it. If you're having all this stress, all this, right? Yeah. And that's why, to our clients, to guys in the houses, to everyone, I sit there and I stress early in recovery is so hard, but you have to build up those tools. You have to have your whole toolbox ready for situations like this. So when you are freaking out and when you are getting stressed, what's the first thing you're gonna do? The first thing you should do is probably pick up your phone and hit up a trusted friend and talk about it real quick. But as addicts and stuff. Like, that's not the route that I ever went.
Yeah.
Like, normally I'm gonna have a small breakdown real quick, and then hopefully that doesn't lead to more.
Right. Yeah, and it's funny you mentioned that. Actually, Tyler had somebody call me the other day in the program just to kind of talk about some stuff, and you know, it's funny when I get these calls, right, and there's a thing where you kind of read through a specific section and just kind of shed light onto it, like your personal experience and insight, and it's funny because every time I hear this specific section of the AA Big Book, right, it's touching on what they're describing as the root of the problem, right? What they're describing is the core, right? The mitochondria. It's the powerhouse of the cell, right? It's like this, the mitochondria of addiction and alcoholism is selfishness and self-centeredness, right? And they're deepening the idea that this is a disease that centers in my mind, right? And then they go on to further break it down for me so I can better understand it. And what they tell us is like, listen, it's like when you are not living on a spiritual basis, when your life isn't rooted in something greater than yourself, what we do as alcoholics and addicts is we put ourselves into the center of our lives, right? And now all of our decision making is based out of fear of either losing what we have or not getting what we want, and we start trying to hop in the driver's seat and control aspects of our lives, whether it's the people around us, whether it's just trying to put ourselves in a position because we are trying to get what we want out of it, right? And then when things don't go our way and we're not getting what we wanted out of it, we start becoming resentful at everything but ourselves, right? It's like all of a sudden it's like, this is the world's problem, this is this person's problem, and if they didn't vote that way, then this wouldn't have happened, and if that guy didn't cut me off in traffic, this wouldn't have happened, right? And it's all of a sudden it becomes the finger pointing game, right? But we forget that what got us in that situation was us trying to get what we wanted out of it, so we took the actions that we thought were best to get what we wanted out of it, and it didn't go our way, and we start pointing the fingers at everybody else, and we become resentful beings, right? And we carry that resentment within us, right? And then we think our intentions are good. We're like, oh no, I've got, moral and psychological convictions galore, right? But it's not rooted in anything. It was rooted in selfishness and self-centeredness. And I think that's very important to touch on, because in times like this, right, where there's all this division in the world and everybody wants to immediately the thing about modern day too is everybody has a platform. Everybody has a platform. If you have a smartphone, you can get online and voice your opinion unwarranted, like onto anybody. You know what I mean? So it's like when you put people in this mindset where they're passionate or there's something that they care about, and then you put them into a fight or flight mode, and then you give them a platform to express that, you know, what do you think's gonna happen? You're gonna have people just all day, every day, and they're putting out all of this stuff, right? And it's all negative. And it ties in to the actor scenario, as we'd call it, so perfectly, because what happens as addicts and alcoholics is, if you're somebody who's maybe feeling a little scared right now, or if you're somebody who's maybe feeling some uncertainty based off of what's happening, your immediate reaction is going to be, how do I get myself out of this? Your immediate reaction is going to be, what do I have to do to protect myself, right? And we forget that it's our own thoughts and actions and plans that got us to where we were when we had to come into recovery in the first place, right? And we forget that what got us to this point was a reliance on something greater than ourselves. And all of the spiritual tools that we learn seem to seemingly disappear out of our mind As soon as our peace and our serenity is threatened and we start going right back into survival mode, fight or flight mode. And when you're in that mode, that's when you're reacting with emotion and not responding. And when you're making emotional reactions, you're like a tornado that just goes through everybody's life. Self will run riot.
Well said.
I just went on a little rant there.
No,
I just had to get it out because it's just there's a lot going on, dude.
It was great, man. I mean, and it hits everyone differently, right? So like the way I know I'm starting to like slip, I'm starting to do my things, right? And like everyone has their signs, and it's good to recognize that. And like I know mine, right? My immediate sign that like, hey, I'm probably not doing what I'm supposed to be doing. I'm probably not sitting there. I'm not in my spiritual aspect. I'm starting to let myself take over. I'm starting to let my own thoughts and actions take over. As I start hitting into self-pity. So big. And I remember, Eric knows this story because he was a part of it. At like 3 months sober, I'm sitting there. I'm starting to freak out already. I'm like, I don't understand what's going on. Why am I not further ahead? Why don't I have, like, I don't get it. Before I got sober this time, I had the house, I had the car, I had everything. Like, why don't I have all that back yet? Right? And he's like, dude, you're like 3 months in. Chill out. And I'm just, don't you know who I think I am?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, man. Dude, it's funny you bring that up because it's so true. Like, that's like one of the coolest experiences, right? Of like being in a position to like manage a sober living is that, you know, you see these guys come in out of treatment or wherever they're coming in and, you know, they're in the house with the guys and you know, everything starts going good. And then all of a sudden, it's always around like the 3 to like 4 month mark, they're like, well, this isn't good enough. It's like, I mean, I thought I was going to be here for like 90 days and then I'd save up some money and get my own apartment. And it's like, listen, man, first of all, it's a process. It's an absolute process. And like, you know, when you look at like just like the data, this is the treatment center side of things coming out of us, but when you look at the timeline of how long post-acute withdrawal symptoms are actually in your mind, like how long clinically it takes for your mind to recover from heavy alcohol and substance abuse, it is like 12 months before like the neuroplasticity of your mind starts reverting back to like where it was before you started just attacking it with substances and messing up your natural regulation of like dopamine and serotonin and like all of that stuff, right? So it's like on a clinical level, when somebody comes up to you 3 months sober and is like, I should feel better, like I should be further ahead, you're like, no, you shouldn't. Like, it's like, do you not realize that it's like, you, like, stripped your mind of its natural ability to, like, regulate emotion. And that takes time to rebuild. So it's not, sobriety isn't just, I'm just gonna stop drinking and stop using and everything gets better. In fact, a lot of the times you stop drinking and using and things might actually get worse for you for a while, right? Because what's going to happen is, and I know you know this, what happens is that you take drugs and alcohol out of the situation and you realize that all of those feelings of self-pity, all of those feelings of inadequacy, all of those deep anxieties and all of those deeply rooted feelings that were within you that like initially were driving you to continuously try to get out of yourself, those are still there and they feel amplified because you're not seeking external things to quiet them. So you're actually just left to sit in there, right? And feel all of it in its entirety, and it feels 10 times more intense than it did when you had the option of just going out and drinking, right? And so it's like the common misconception is like people are like, I thought I'd feel better. Well, actually, a lot of the time, you might actually be feeling worse for that first little bit because you're learning how to live life without that external thing that you have been using to like medicate that problem, right? Because drugs and alcohol are never the problem, right? They were just your solution to that problem until they weren't anymore, right? And you have to find a new solution, and that takes time.
Yeah, man. I mean, you take drugs and alcohol out of my, like, I can only use myself as an example. And here's the thing, right? Like, started using when I was 12, did all this stuff, and so I took drugs and alcohol out of the equation, and all that did was take away my number one coping mechanism. Mm-hmm. It took away my only coping mechanism, right? So now here I am, 3-4 months sober, and all these emotions, all these things, life is actually starting to happen. And that's what was actually occurring, right? Like, I finally, like, had real bills that I actually could pay. Like, things did start actually getting a little bit better. And as they got better, though, I realized, like, I don't know how to do this. I'm 32 years old. I don't know how to live life yet. Because, like, I never did. I never actually did the thing. And so, what I had to do, I had to learn really, really fast. Yeah. And luckily, I had a whole bunch of dudes in that house that were, like, there to show me the way and show me things that, like, helped them out, and guys with more time than me, and, like, I just kind of, like, had to grab onto their coattails and be like, this is the route we're going. Mm-hmm. And then on top of that, like, I had my sponsor, and he was through a lot. Like, I called him up being like, I don't understand why, like, these 9-step promises aren't coming true. I still have a war in my mind. I still have a fear of people. He's like, dude, calm down. You're doing great. And I was like, this is doing great? This is what doing great feels like? And he's like, yeah, you're living life. Yeah. Congratulations. And so I had a recommendation from a couple people to get, like, more help outside of just that, right? And, like, I needed that. And I'm a big advocate for outside help because, like, it helped me so much that, like, I needed more.
Yeah. And that's just the thing, man, is, like, it's just, you know, there's, like, 3 different types of people typically that come into, like, a sober living, for example, right? There's usually the most common, right, is the guy who, like, doesn't believe truly that he's an alcoholic or addict, and he has this idea that he was going to go to treatment and then stay in a sober living, and all he needed to do was just get a job, get some money in his pocket, and, like, his plan is he's going to go back and, like, re-enter society and somehow be able to drink and use like a gentleman and just, like, go on with his life, right? There's the second type of guy who comes in who is, like, the guy is there for legal, like, reasons, or he's there because his parents need him there, or, like, he's there because his wife kicked him out of the house and told him if he stayed in sober living for 6 months, he could come back, right? So you have these people that come in and they're being driven by external, like, influences to complete, like, sober living and treatment and do the deal, right? And then you have, like, the third guy that rolls in. And this guy is the most special guy. This guy, his life is fucked, right? It's like, this guy has nothing. He's like, he has no other options, and he's coming in, and he probably doesn't truly believe that, like, this is going to, like, help him out, but he has, like, enough willingness to at least try, because, like, he literally has no other option because his life sucks that bad, right? And it's like, those are, like, typically the 3 main categories of guys coming into the house. And it's always the guy who's, like, a little skeptical but really doesn't have any other option. He's the guy that when he walks in, the way he presents himself and the way that he looks, your mind wants to say, this guy isn't going to make it. But really, it's the exact opposite. It's like, this guy is the guy who has the highest chance of making it, because he's already battled through the most difficult part of recovery. Whether you're 1 day sober, 1 year sober, a decade sober, the most difficult thing to do in recovery always is admitting to yourself that you have a problem and that you're powerless over alcohol or drugs. Right? And it's the first step is acknowledging the unmanageability and the powerlessness that comes with being an addict or alcoholic. And that guy number 3, has come in with a baseline understanding of that powerlessness and that unmanageability, right? Where everybody else, to go back to the actor scenario and what we're talking about, they still have the delusion of control in their lives, right? And it's just very, very interesting, man, because we see it all the time. And it's like, we get up here and guys will always talk about like, I want to know how to stay sober. I want to know how to get sober. And it's like, we don't have a design of living that tells you how to get sober. We don't have a design of living that tells you how to stay sober. What we have is a design of living that will introduce something greater than yourself into your life. And a byproduct of doing that process and accepting that help is you will just not have a need to seek validation through all of these external things. And so sobriety is not a goal and it's not the destination. It is just a byproduct of what we're actually doing here, which is learning all of these other things, right? Oh.
Yeah, man. You touched on it. You nailed it, right? It's that willingness. And it's so hard early. And you see the guys come in and they're just broken. And like those are the ones that like you could see something great happen. Because as long as that willingness is there, right? Like nothing else has worked. We've tried everything. And nothing's worked, and what do? We're just like, we find the guy with the most sobriety in the house, and then you just have to have that willingness to just go with them. You just go with them. You start hanging out with them. You start going to every meeting that they're going to, you tag along, you start doing this, and like just the willingness to actually go and do something about it. Right? And step one, as you're right, like the acceptance part of it, man. You gotta accept that you are, and like that this isn't working, and your way's not working. Because guess what? Chances are, like, you're not going into a sober living or anywhere that like we work on a winning streak. It's just not happening.
Yeah. No. Nobody's like, you know what, my life is going great right now. I'm going to go live in a sober living house.
No, it's not happening.
That's not how it works, you know?
So it's the ones that come in and like it really hasn't worked. They've tried every single way and they finally like realize like their way is not working. Now they have to have this willingness to just start doing the things. And then guess what? That still happens later on in sobriety. Even now, like I have to find the willingness to just continue doing what has been working.
I think it gets progressively harder, and this is why I touched on that, right? Is the more time you get, right? And this is from my personal experience. I've had years of sobriety and I've relapsed and I know what that looks like, right? And it becomes more increasingly difficult to have the baseline understanding that I'm an alcoholic, that I am powerless over alcohol, and that my life is unmanageable. That becomes a harder and more difficult concept to understand when things start getting better. When I start making better money, when I'm not in debt, when I have a vehicle, when I'm going on dates with girls, and like things are going my way. It's like all of a sudden my life isn't this just continuous cycle of shit. It's like, oh no, like things are getting better. Like I have genuine connections with people. I'm holding down a job. Like that is when it actually gets difficult. And that's why I think they always say like this is where the work really begins, right? Like after your first year, second year, third year of sobriety, because you're going to start battling the mind, right? And what did we touch on earlier in the episode? That is the mitochondria. The mitochondria is the selfishness and self-centeredness that's rooted in your mind, right? And the alcoholic, for no particular reason at any time, can just lose track of that powerlessness and that unmanageability. And as soon as I introduce that drink into my body, it's game over. Dude, I had 2 years of sobriety. I had a huge network of people in recovery out here. My roommate was sober. I had a great job. I was traveling all the time. And I found myself one day after getting 2 years in San Francisco on a work conference. And it was seemingly just like that story they always tell where I was like, this can't hurt me if I just put it in some milk. You know what I mean? And I take a drink. And within, I think it was like 4 weeks, within a month of doing that, I was fired from that job. I lost my place of living. I'm couch surfing with a bunch of people. I went over the next like 6 months on that run. I worked 4 different jobs and burnt everything to the ground. And it's like, it's crazy to think that like it becomes more difficult as time goes on in your recovery journey to stay in tune with that baseline step 1. I'm powerless over alcohol and that my life is unmanageable, right? And it's just, what is the only thing that ensures immunity from that? Working with a newcomer, right? Working with somebody else in the program. That's what they say is the one thing that ensures immunity.
Intensive work with another alcoholic.
But if you're paying attention, what has Tyler and I both said is the number one thing that we do. Sorry guys, we had a little bit of some technical difficulties, but just to pick up where I was leaving off and where I was going with that is that, you know, the one thing that ensures immunity over that next drink, right, is working intensively with another alcoholic or addict. But yet, as you guys know, and as you heard from both of our stories, the first thing that goes out the window, the first thing that we stop doing when all of a sudden we're not convinced that we are powerless and that our lives are unmanageable, is stop going to meetings, stop calling your sponsors, stop calling sponsees, right? And we retract from the only thing that is said to have given us immunity from that next drink.
Yeah. And to round it back to where like this conversation began, that's insane right now, right? Like the world's crazy, stuff's going on. So like the people with a couple years sobriety right now, like this is actually a new situation that they haven't gone through. And so they might start having that idea, right? That I got this attitude. And all of a sudden when your buddy starts sitting there and being like, I got this, maybe check up on him like a couple more times than you normally do throughout the week.
Yeah, and I think too, like with everything going on and all this division, this is when people start separating, right? When we need to be together the most, all of a sudden, dude, it's like we're getting divided, right? And people are trying to like act like it's either this side or this side, and you're either with us or you're against us, right? And this division is just nothing but bad news for a addict or alcoholic in recovery. Because the second that we are no longer doing the things that we need to do that bring unity, and we start separating ourselves from our fellow addicts and alcoholics, that's when shit starts hitting the fan, dude. And I think we're seeing a lot of that right now, man, and it's just tough.
Yeah, guess what? Alcoholism, addiction, doesn't care what side of the political fence you're on. Yeah. And either should anyone in that room. Yeah. But you start to see it. You start to see the division, and like, as you said, the only thing that guarantees a sobriety is intensive work with another alcoholic, right? And if that can't be done because you guys have two different mindsets on this, well, maybe we gotta live in acceptance a little bit more, and learn to just, it is what it is. Yeah. Like if someone's been there for you for the last couple of years or something like that, maybe like don't throw them away just because like you had a different viewpoint. Yeah.
Yeah, it's tough, man. And unfortunately we see this, like it's very cyclical. But I just wanted to touch on that because, you know, the last thing we need right now is people allowing all of these negative things going on in the media and everything else to separate them from their fellow addicts and alcoholics. And if you are struggling with that right now and you're seeing a lot of stuff on social media and you're fearful of what's going to happen, just talk to somebody about it and remember that, you know, we're not allied with any sect, denomination, politics, organization, or religion, right? And we neither endorse nor oppose any causes. The primary purpose is to help the addict and alcoholic who's still suffering. And we just need to remember that that is what we are doing here, right? And if we can remember that, maybe we don't have to see so many relapses and other things going on right now, because it's getting a little dicey out there. So yeah. So, anyways, what else do you got for us?
Man, me? Not much, man. I got this phone call about 15 minutes before I had to be here today.
It's pretty incredible. And he was like, oh, what are we going to be talking about? I'm like, don't worry about it. I'm like, just show up with an open mind, dude, and like, I'll lead you to the promised land.
And then we get to spit some willingness, some actor scenario, all sorts. I was like, these are things I love touching on, so we're good.
Yeah. No, dude, it's good, man. Happy that you're able to join us. Sorry about that little technical difficulty there in the middle, but we got it all figured out. But yeah, guys, so another thing to touch on, make sure, if you haven't already, subscribe to our channel. We're almost to 100 subscribers. That's a big deal for us. Follow us on TikTok, Instagram, Facebook. We're posting daily content on all those platforms. And we're just trying to keep putting stuff out there, man, and keep trying to reach people in different ways, right? Because I think a lot of people are struggling right now and they're looking for help, and we just want to make sure that we have as many different avenues for people to find us as possible out there.
Yeah, man. And if you are struggling, the number one tool at your dispense now is in your pocket. You're on it all the time. Pick up the phone, hit someone up. Guess what? If you don't have anyone to call, you can call me. I guarantee that.
Yeah, we'll put his number on the screen.
Yeah, we'll just throw it out there.
Call Tyler.
What about struggling, having a rough day, just need to punch something? I'm here for all of it.
Yeah. Yeah, dude. So, yeah, hopefully you guys took something out of this. We appreciate you tuning in, and we'll see you next week.